Hello, hello, hello. And we're back. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Torch Day here at Book People. We are so thrilled to be here. This is our day of sales where Book People has generously donated 10% of all sales in person and online to support Torch Literary Arts and the Black women writers that we serve. Round of applause for Book People. My name is Amanda Johnston. I'm the founder and executive director of Torch Literary Arts, and I am so excited to be here. This is what I get to do every single day. I get to amplify Black women writers and fangirl over your incredible work. So thank you so much to our incredible authors for joining us for this very special panel of local authors. Yes, we write right here in Austin, Texas, well, Central Texas. So some of us live in surrounding cities, but we're a municipality now, aren't we? It's like a metroplex or so, something, whatever they call it. We all here together in Central Texas. But we're doing incredible work in the literary scene. I see some other incredible authors and Torch features in the audience. Shout out KB Brookins. Shout out Anarn, host publishing. We love to see you, Nina. We love to see our folks in the audience. Thank you so much for coming out to support literary arts and these incredible Black women writers in your hometown. I'm going to start first by introducing our authors, and then they're going to read a little section from their published works. We'll have a moderated conversation, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. Sound good?
Yes.
Y'all here? All right. Wonderful. Jasmine Gaines, she, her, is a Black and queer spoken word poet and theater practitioner from Houston, Texas. She holds a BA in English and Performance Studies from Texas A&M University and an MFA in Drama and Theater for Youth and Communities from the University of Texas at Austin. Gaines is an award-winning poet and practitioner, including the 2021 Sexton Prize for Poetry from the Black Spring Press Group and the 2021 Winfred Ward Scholarship for Excellence in Youth Drama Theater from the American Alliance for Theater Education. Working in education and social justice in Austin, Texas, she utilizes drama, creative writing, and devised performance to address social injustices with participants of all ages. Learn more about Jasmine at jasminegaines.com and follow her on her social media at Jasmine Gaines Poetry. Kelis Rowe is a stay-at-home mom and former homeschooler who writes sweeping classic teen romance novels from the points of view of Black girls who are stronger than they know and the Black teen boys who just gotta love them. Her award-winning debut novel, Finding Jupiter, is a contemporary romance about an introverted artist and poet and a champion swimmer who bond through shared grief and fall in love one fateful Memphis summer. It incorporates journal pages of art and found poetry from the pages of classic novels, including The Great Gatsby and Their Eyes Were Watching God. Kelis writes out of her home in Leander, Texas. Prudence Arceneaux, a native Texan, is a poet who teaches English and creative writing at Austin Community College in Austin, Texas. Her work has appeared in various journals, including the Academy of American Poets, Poem a Day, Limestone, New Texas, Hazmat Review, Texas Observer, Whiskey Island Magazine, African Voices, and Inkwell. She is the author of 2 chapbooks of poetry, Dirt and Liberty. She is the English department chair at Austin Community College. Thank you so much, Jasmine, Kelis, and Prudence for being here. We'll start first with Kelis Rowe, sharing from her incredible book, Finding Jupiter.
I always get nervous at readings, and I actually changed my seat so I wouldn't have to go first, but here we are. Here we are. So my favorite thing about writing YA romance is the meet cutes. It's like the part where the heart begins to swell, and in Finding Jupiter, it's the meet cute is very much a love at first sight. And the book is written in 2 points of view And so I'm going to read a little bit from the point of view of Orion. The main characters' names are Ray and Orion. So I'm going to read a little bit from the meet cute with, well, the first time that Orion sees Ray. So this is inside the head of a teenage boy who's love struck. Before this, her best friend spots Orion before she does, and her best friend is kind of hot in the pants. She's kind of like a boy getter wherever she goes, and so she has her eyes set on him, and he's trying his best to ignore her because she's annoying. Okay. This girl keeps skating past and watching me. It got awkward around the fifth or sixth time around, so I moved from the edge of the rink and found a seat off to the side. When I'm at school or work, I'm in a constant battle to block out the light and quiet the noise and stay focused. When I'm here, I like to let all the noise and lights and music and everything wash over me. Here and underwater are the two places I can just exist as I am, be part of the world around me, instead of coping with it for a change. This girl who is now skating towards me is kind of messing up my zen. Hi there. She sits right next to me. Not close enough where we seem like we're together, but close enough to make it odd to not answer her. Hey, we watched skaters pass by without saying anything else for a while. So, are you here with somebody? She asks, turning her whole body towards me, which tells me this is happening. Yeah, my best friend Mo is around here somewhere. I go back to watching the skaters. In my peripheral, I can see her still pretending not to watch me. Where's Mo? He would love this girl. She's just his type. She's kind of tall, light-skinned with long curly hair. She's also the type of interested that he would vibe with. Something tells me she didn't just come here to skate. Mo, your friend Monique? Clever. Moses. We share a smile. You here with somebody? I ask to be polite. She nods. I came with my roommate, Ray. Raymond? I ask, mimicking her. She laughs, full out this time, very hard. I don't think what I said was that funny, but I know what this is. Girls always giggle when they first start talking to me until they become bored. Truth is, I'm impressed with how well I'm handling this so far. I wonder if the key to not being nervous with a girl is to not really be interested in her. Oh my God, she says, gawking at some skaters. That's my roommate. She rushes to the barrier wall so fast I hop up and do the same almost involuntarily. I've seen skaters do routines countless times, but this crew is different. There's a guy in front who is a linebacker huge, and a girl behind him, and behind her, a tall girl who is a vision. I'm still processing the size of this superhero trio on skates when the chorus to Crank That starts. They all jump, spin around, and skate backwards at the same time. When the same line repeats in the chorus, the Hulk and the girl in the middle slow down. But Superwoman, the goddess with the cotton candy braids, moonwalks past them. She reaches the front position just as the next verse is about to begin. And when they all jump and spin around and skate forward again, and then they spin around and skate forward again. Ray's friend is losing it beside me, which is getting me extra hyped too. The whole place is going off for the superheroes. I spot Mo on the side of the rail halfway around the rink. He points towards the middle of the rink and I nod, letting him know I saw it too. I glance back and find Superwoman dipping and skating as the song goes on. She's all I see. That's it.
Hi, y'all. I'm going to read a few poems from Somebody's Daughter. I think I'll read just the first two and then the last two. Is that okay? Okay. Double Dutch. I learned the ropes as a child, sitting between my mother's legs, the back of my neck on pelvic bone. This is where I first learned that to be a Black woman is to persevere through pain. She would tell me this is the hair I got, and that I have to stop being so tender-headed. There are things my mom could not get into my thick skull, or braid tight into the scalp. And there are some things my mom could make me know, like the pop of a bobo against my head, wrapping around the roots of my twist, telling me black looks good on you. And the clip at the end hollers, remember that. Sometimes deciding who I am is hard when the net on the bell is too murky. I hope someone could see through it like Mama really could make glass. The bell on black was pulled off a long time ago and replaced with the satin bonnet. This makes it easier to sleep at night and keeps this hair from falling out. To be black and to be woman is merely a game of double dutch. I'm still learning how to skip the ropes. And then this one, I have to kind of preface this one just a little bit. But I wrote, actually, I'm just going to read it. A disappearing act. Drew was the most important first, not because he was my first crush, but because he was my first rejection. His reason being, I was black, he was not. In the first grade, I discovered blackness. Since that moment, I tried for so long to make myself similar. Remember the old days, a little black girl too eager to burn her scalp for the image. The sound of tender-headed cries, the smell of hot combs, and the pop of bobos always accompanied a voice proclaiming my hair was too thick. That girl wondered if she could hang herself with Carly's hair on the jungle gym. She could never be like them. I was not white, but could blush myself pink after the next one said I'd be beautiful with my hair laid down. My mind slowly waxing, I thought my skin would marble over. Alabaster treachery, I was fitting in by forgetting me. I was speaking properly in the name of porcelain. I could see my reflection in his pale white skin. By 15, proud to be spread under a boy who swears he only likes white girls. All right, so the beginning of the book is a little more like looking at my childhood, and then towards the end, it's more like reflecting through adulthood and maybe some healing. A walk in the pines. A walk in the pines is not the same walk you made with your dog at 14, but it still is a product of social distancing, wondering when it will all be over. You walk far, taking the houses, neighbors, and their cars, wondering where did everybody go. DeAndre does not live in the house he gave you hickeys in, and Kiki's grandma doesn't sell cool cups. No one is fist fighting, and you wonder when did it get so white here. Guess the schools weren't too ghetto after all. And some of the kids you saw then are not kids at all. It be like that. Like growing older is like disappearing, like the pavement darkening, like trees blocking the view from the window, like next door strangers, or maybe it is the park renovation. Blue herons in the water, kids riding their bike, police patrolling Cascade Drive, and the field you used to cut across has houses on it, cascading in a maze, with kids you won't grow up with because you are already full grown, and parents you won't meet because they are too old. And you'll be too old one day, and the home you grew up in will be almost unrecognizable, and the neighborhood an apparition of something that died young. And my last one, this is my favorite poem in the book. It's my mom's favorite too. I wrote it at my parents' dining table during COVID. And my mom is a retired English teacher, and she edited it a little bit, so it's our little special poem. Hydrangeas in bloom. Do not forget the soil you grew from. It is the soil where you one day bloomed, blue in the nights you cried privately, pink at the thought of your first love, purple in your young woke phase, white when you could not go on, orange because you were still alive, leaves winding up the wall you could go all the way. You thought no flowers grew at the kind of place you knew you never took the time to prune. Sometimes you must cut branches that insist on being dead so you can grow. Didn't you know? There's no tree, building, or wall that can keep you from ascension. Be it spring, fall, summer, you can survive winter. Coming back every year, blossoming beautifully like not dead yet, like you're not done dancing in the wind. You thought no flowers grew at the kind of place you knew you never took the time to water you. You are not a wildflower. You can't grow in any condition. Take some time to find what feeds you. Give attention to your substance. Your existence is not dependent on someone who didn't tend to the garden they kept you in. The soil is not your fault. The soil did what it could. The soil has a life too, and it is a complicated matter. Forgive the soil that grew you. You thought no flowers grew at the kind of place you knew, but you are a gift to the ground. Petals phenomenon, a big bouquet, a perennial person too bud to pluck. You are moon dance by firelight, tequila with a little lime, a big white wedding kissing Big Daddy in a red gown. Abracadabra, you are magic, let's dance, tough stuff in the limelight. Invincible weave white, baby, you made it. You are flowers in a dreamscape, a field of coloration, an endless summer, still in bloom. Blue in the nights you cried privately, pink at the thought of your first love, purple in your young woke phase, white when you could not go on, orange because you are still alive. Thank you.
I'm going kind of old school because my books are apparently stuck in a box in a place called Hazmat, Texas. Don't know where that is, but it comes with a notification that has like a flag that says you're not getting your stuff. I remember thinking about like coming to read today and book people. I love that this reading space is next to like the littles area. So like when I'm thinking about the things I want to read, I just keep thinking about like a 3-year-old going, "Hey, mommy, what's that word?" So I tried to be better. So this first one I'm going to read, I should clarify that I am that strange kid that you met in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, who spent the entire year studying medieval torture devices. I mean, the nuns let me do it, so why not? And then the next year, I fell in love with like nautical disasters. So if the gods of the waters were going to like destroy any kind of man-made thing, I was reading up on that. So the Andrea Doria, the Andrea Gale, the Titanic. Yeah, and I'm not known for my love poems. Those two things go together. Listening to Roger Wallace's Crazy Love. Each summer, 500 million 3-inch worms blackhead the pores of glacial faces. Scientists don't understand it, but don't call it crazy. Fascinating, scintillating, that's what you are. Worthy of study. But you've had the narrative arc all wrong. The main character, man or woman or water bear, just dies. No cancer, no tragic falls, no consumption, no rickets, not drunk. Just stops being, and no one cares. At the corner of north, 41 degrees, 43 minutes, 32 seconds, and west, 49 degrees, 56 minutes, 49 seconds. There's a room of velvet, brocade, and satin, bespoke and liquid black, symphony full, bodies, strings, organs, a cellist's forearm, and lunar tempo. No need to change the history. Of course they played while the ship dervished to the floor. If you were about to be rewombed in cold amnion, wouldn't you want your last thoughts to be of the first time you realized you could please yourself? With concentration, practice, and the movement of pressured fingers? Why does it have to be crazy? What if your blood is supposed to be blue? What if the connection between bone and tendon is supposed to be broken? Bones dissolved, the besotted malunioned. What if sound only travels through a rictus of agonies? What if, just what if, you aren't supposed to come up for air? All right, so I'm going to continue with my nerd theme. I love space. Anything that has to do with like the universe, but like I knew I was never going out there because I can't see. But I started thinking about like if everything failed with teaching, like what would I want to do? There's a long list of things my dad would not be proud of. But I realized that like one of those things is like I want to be the poet laureate for NASA. Like, I know Ada's got a poem and it's doing its whole thing, but like, I want to be that thing. So like, should you find out that that's like KB, like that's the next thing, right? So we have the poet laureate for Austin. Let's do NASA, right? Yeah. And see, I'm from Houston too. Like I got all the connections, right? This is entitled NASA Needs Poets. What I wouldn't give for the chance to sail the void. I'd let myself get yawed, learn more languages. I'm already fluent in English and grief. Learn how to vomit in a bag to shield myself from too much light. I've trained my whole life to live in confined space. But I'll settle for being the first to talk up the musky promises of Terran land under Grand Canyon red Martian skies. Debate on CNN which atmosphere is most toxic, Venus or Earth. To be a meteorologist of Jupiter, surely even I can be right 30% of the time. Stargazer that I am, a title I'd name tag even were I naked. I'm sure I should know names and distances, but I'll gladly quilt degrees and magnitudes on the insides of my eyelids. I'll start every poem with the image of the star-eating black hole, burping 4 million tons of life stuff, silently shouting heartbeats and future tense. Truly, I was born with an understanding of the subtleties of darkness, and a need to know. Can you see hate from space? I want to proclaim the truth of dark matter. Yes, your Lord said, let there be light, but there is so much more that is dark, terrifyingly simple. Not knowing what is true north other than what we've said of, we have been wrong, again. To be the harbinger of our savage hunger when we make it to Europa and taint its amniotic seas, extol the paths of dark energy that weave through the light, making highways, making signposts we should follow. Does it matter what Pluto is if we don't know what we are? Make whispers revelations in my ears. You'll see. They'll want me on the payroll as we expand into the never-ending, 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 never. I think I should probably say, like, these poems that I'm reading today are in my book that's coming out from Texas Review Press in the spring. So hopefully I'll be back here at BookPeople touting proprioception. I know, I'm difficult. That's my last name. I choose difficult words. So here's my thing. Everybody has been really excited the last few years about nature shows. Like, everyone loves Sir Attenborough. I get issues with him. I mean, I like the pretty pictures and all, but this is entitled Nature Show. The Lord offers explanation. Sir Attenborough believes what he says when announcing that the Aguilas tides are the fastest shifting on the planet. But I can't help thinking, what the hell is wrong with him? Apparently, he's never studied the precipice of black adolescence, the phenomenon in time lapse of the male species deliquescing from cute to convict, the female, how pretty ebbs, prey flows. The good Lord seminarial establishes half tides, like we aren't all half given to the ass whooping the moon gives the earth. And you better believe that's what happens. And no amount of foot in the back girdling can control this budge. Our brain fluid has little hope. The full tides of our hearts, even less. What we are studying, anthro-apologizing, is deeper than the Mariana Trench, wider than the Cassini Gap. But he wouldn't know that since he doesn't concern himself with black space. BBC One needs to observe, inhuman blind, set up midnight cameras, see a system tidally locked in hate. Police camera traps catch the vortices created as brown skin pushes against armor, pulled to embrace by white arms. Forget about what you thought you knew. Armadillos transmitting leprosy, pluralizing octopuses to octopi, and no one has seen $8 trillion stacked. Let's talk about a gravitational power that could make the Mississippi reverse its course, stop the supply of skins and furs. Imagine waking each day, not knowing if you were drowning, if you were sandbarred, if you were undertowed, if you were pipelined, underrolled. The production must be air gap, though. Reality is just another version of historical publication. We don't really need another old white man telling us the science of our sex, of our race. But maybe, if the voice has a British accent, you'll listen, you'll believe.
Thank you so much. Round of applause for all of these authors. Wow. Listen and believe.
Just saying.
Woo! All right. Well, let's get into some questions. Like I said, I'm going to be mindful of time because I can go on. I'm a huge fan of all of these writers. But things that I see that are coming, how do I say, influences into our work is our personal narratives, right? Our personal stories. And I do feel that Black women have a very particular way and a very powerful way of pulling from lived experiences to inspire their creative work. Can you talk about the balancing that you do with that? And obviously, fiction gives a little more room in that too, but, it's a story, your work is, Kelis, is so very true to the Black adolescent experience, right? So just how you, again, balance that telling and glimpse into personal stories and lines with what you share with the world when you share your works.
Yeah. I'll give a really quick backstory. I wrote my book during the pandemic. Well, I finished it during the pandemic and sold it during the pandemic, but I was the person in high school who was kind of just always in all Black in the corner, quiet. I didn't make friends. I had a really rich internal life. On the weekends, I grew up in Memphis in the South, and I was a church girl. So my cousin was the pastor, my entire family went there, and so my life was church. And church is where I was more myself because I was with my family mostly. So that was my life, just to give you a snapshot of how introverted and private I am. When I became a mom, my son needed spinal cord surgery, but I'm also a workhorse. I'm a Virgo, and the time I was old enough to get a job, I had at least 2 jobs through college, etc. And so I gave birth to a boy who needed spinal cord surgery, and so I couldn't go back to work, and without my work, I was kind of lost. So I poured myself into being the best mom, stay-at-home mom. I was going to homeschool, which I did for 10 years, and right before the pandemic, my son, started going to public school, and I was kind of like, okay, who am I now? What am I going to do with life? I couldn't go back to my career because I was in market research and technology moves at the speed of light, and I couldn't go back. And so I had always been a writer and decided that I was going to write a book. And when I decided that I was going to write for young people, selfishly, I wanted to write for my teenage self, but also because I know there are so many kids like me and like kids in general who have rich internal lives and, home lives that could vary as many ways as we vary as individuals. I wanted to write something that, yes, would be entertaining, but also would contribute to healing for young people. I try to be a very private person, but I do pour a lot of my life into my work. And so this book and the books that follow are usually about a girl who has a rich internal life and who has family wounds to heal from. And so in Finding Jupiter, that wound is kind of like my father is still in my life, and he's married. My parents have been married a million years and everything, but he was emotionally unavailable to us as kids. And so, at 40, when I wrote the book, I was kind of, in retrospect, I realized that there was a connection between that and abandonment type things. And, in my 30s, kind of looking at how those things affected my marriage and, wanting to fix things. And so I kind of went back to this age of falling in love for the first time, which for me was with my husband. And so there's been this huge journey and introspection that I took that I wanted to give to young people who might be falling in love young, and where they can kind of start to go inside and ask themselves, why don't I trust that this person really loves me? What is it about? to ask those questions that I asked in my 30s, you know, so that they could have a more full love, so they could experience the love that is being presented to them versus being skeptical of it and missing out.
Can I schedule a therapy appointment?
I was going to be a therapist, but yeah, but I majored in psychology, but I took a class in college that was meant to weed you out, and I'm too much of an empath. If I was, you know, if this was sci-fi, I would be a hyper empath. Like I would just want to take everybody home with me. So I pour into my work things that, you know, stories and themes and experiences that I want young people to take away from, that could contribute to their lives, like getting to know themselves and projecting and accepting love more fully. So I write YA romance. So, yeah.
And again, with, you know, how do you balance your sharing your personal lived experiences with what you choose to share with the world in your writing?
Well, this is hard because I don't have a hard boundary at all. I am very unashamed about my lived experiences, and I think that, especially in this first book, a lot of the poems that I included were poems that I wrote as a young person when I was 17, just starting poetry, and then I was editing the book and writing it and finishing it during the pandemic. And I got to go back a lot and edit my thoughts of a 17-year-old, which felt, it was really healing for me to be so far away from the experiences that I was writing about at 17. But also there were things that I was experiencing while I was getting my undergrad, like the death of my father. And I remember being in a writing residency, and I was fresh out of like his death, and I wrote something like the same day and submitted it, and the instructor was like, maybe you should let yourself have some time to breathe between like wanting to like edit this poem or write this poem and the death. And so I'm somewhere between. I do like to write stuff when it's fresh, but I think holding it and placing it somewhere, and letting it sit for a little, let it simmer, and then going back and looking at it with fresh eyes from a new perspective allows me to edit. But I love the raw emotion you get from being able to share your lived experiences as they are so close. And I do have quite a few poems about the death of my father, which we didn't have a great relationship, but he shows up a lot in the poetry. So it's very interesting. But I consider my writing creative nonfiction. I don't have a lot of stuff that I don't share. It's so bad. It's so bad, y'all. But I love it. I love it. And yeah, I think that's it.
No, I love that. That was so important too, that you said, you know, like you don't have shame around your work. And I think that's really a powerful point to get to. It's a hard place to get to, right? Words, I was just talking about this some the other day. The power of words is so strong that it can literally, you know, stifle us and freeze us that we can't even write it on the page. You know, and it's just you and the page. But that's how powerful it is. So what's forcing that is the power behind that, or is the fear and the shame. And it's a beautiful thing right beyond that. I also want to quote Nikki Finney. Y'all know Nikki Finney? You already know. If you don't, you need to know. Go read some Nikki Finney. But Nikki Finney once said in a workshop, throw the glass against the wall, write the poem on the page. And that stuck with me as a way to always remember your emotional self separate from your craft self. Mm-hmm. Right? And that that's your responsibility then as the writer to know what you need to do in the moment. Sometimes what you really need to do is go throw some glasses against the wall. Yeah. But then that poem, the poet, will come and write. Wonderful, thank you.
Who's cleaning up all that glass?
That's to worry about it another time.
Throw ice instead. It melts and you have to worry about it. I don't know that I do a very good job either. I think about what you have said before, Amanda, when you talk to students at ACC, when you talk about the I, right? Like most of us in creative writing programs are taught that the I isn't really like you're supposed to make the separation, right? Mm-hmm. You just say, "It's me. I'm here," right? Mm-hmm. So I struggle with the training. So the I is me. But then if you ask me about it, I go, oh no. No, I would never do this. I would never say those things about surrender, like that kind of thing, right? But I don't know that I have a good balance. These poems that I shared with you and most of the poems in this book that's coming out were written in a state of terror. So yes, we're all going through COVID, and then I don't know if you remember what the news was like in 2020. And my mother had just moved in with me. Oh, wow. This is being recorded. My mother had just moved in with me. I'm her caregiver, and I didn't know that she listened to CNN 24 hours a day. Thank you for that sound. But yeah, so like it was just this flood of stuff coming in, right, and permeating my sleep, and so yeah, how do I say this? I realized that terror is a very fertile space for me, but I'm kind of hoping that this election doesn't put us in a state of terror. I'd love to write like frantically again, but I don't think there's enough like Zoloft to keep me from needing high blood pressure medication, like to go through the whole thing, right? So yeah, right. I'm from Southeast Texas, so I'm from Liberty. Houston and Beaumont, like it's in between those spaces, but it's by like Leander and Silsbee. And the U.S. Postal Service, they're so good. They send you a thing that's like, here's what your mail is today, right? So I was scrolling through it, looking for the box of books, and there was a thing from someone from Leander. My heart rate went up, and I was like, I need to go. Like, they know where I live. So I want to find a better separation. But I also think that there are times when I just have to give myself over to the thing, right? So whether it's fear or the giddiness of love, the moments of joy, like sometimes I just have to let it go, right? Like you said, somebody else will pick up the glass. Like somebody else will, I don't know, do the laundry. Somebody else will do something else, right? Because I think I need to say the thing, and so I say the thing.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yes. We don't have to hold everything, right? But again, being Black women writers, there's an expectation, and we know where that comes from historically, societally, right? Community, within our own communities too, that to look to, this is heavy. Yep. Take this, right? Or then when there's traumatic and hard, universal experiences that we're experiencing in the same time in reality, right? Like Prudence, you're talking about the other things that happened during the pandemic. George Floyd, the many, many murders that were happening at the hands of police, of Black people, that was happening and videotaped and being spread through social media and the news constantly. And FYI, that hasn't stopped. The same amount of media attention has changed. But then it is still turned to Black women to what are we going to do? Is the underlining message is if something's going to happen, it's going to be for us, and that's no different in our writing, right? So the question I have is, with that expectation that's kind of just always lofting in the world, where do you find space to write to the hard thing, write about the hard thing rather, and write about whatever else you are inspired to write about? I'll say from personal experience, I've definitely felt the turn of heads looking at me as not just a writer and a literary administrator, but also as a social justice organizer, and different things that we do in the world. Something happens, boom, the eyes turn to you, and I'm like, I might have been in the middle of writing a poem about rainbows, and I need to write this poem about these rainbows, or whatever it is that I have, right? So just, can you talk a little bit about if you do feel a responsibility to write about current times?
I think I already said. But what I wanted to say was that I was thinking about the Praise Song project that you have. So I don't know if you all know this or not, but this human here received a very significant award, and part of that award was to gather songs of praise about the lives of humans, right? To get poets to write these poems. And as I've been going back to that website and looking at those poems, like, that's been a good safe place for me, right? To remember the nature of praise in it, because it's so easy, right? Like, I'm carrying my phone in my back pocket, which I didn't do 3 years ago, right? But I'm always worried, like, what do I need to know? What do I need to see or hear? And it's good to get the praise song first, right? It's good to read about, like, KB, the teacher, right? Like, it's good to read about the doctor who helps people and who has really great socks, which is what I'm buying today for my helping out, right? Because we carry so much, we forget to even set it down. Like, we know where it is when we do set it down, and we just forget, and we just keep dragging it with us. So, like, if there's any place to find that, like, part of the reason why I love coming to readings here at BookPeople, as I said before, is the littles. Like, to hear them, because they're not caught up in all this.
Yeah, right.
Right? There's so much joy because there's a book over there about penguins. Or there's a book about a taco dinosaur. Like, whatever it is over there, right? Or that they didn't know that there are carpeted stairs. Like, there's just, like, this joy that happens there, right? That's what I'm always looking for. I'm always looking for, like, the smallest thing that I can, because everything else is so loud.
I'm going to add to that. It's so true that what's out there, like, we know it, we're faced with it, we're inundated with it. That's a huge reason why I decided to write young adult romance for Black teenagers. It's literary, so it's also useful in schools, but I made a conscious decision to tell stories about Black American teenagers where the antagonist is not racism or the police or a ghost from slavery or something like that, because I have a 16-year-old son, and not that those stories are not important. They are, because it's important for all readers to experience these hard topics in nuanced ways. So all those books are important. But I have a teenager, and in freshman year, his reading list comes home, and the reading list is full of amazing novels for young people, and every choice that had a Black face on the cover, that topic was racism. Young Black American children, battling racism.
Right.
And I feel like, those stories are important, but let's balance it out.
Right.
Because the things that we tell ourselves about who we are, the way that we inform ourselves about who we are, within the context of our families and the world, is the same way that other people who don't know us inform themselves about who we are. You can go to any country and ask somebody, what is your opinion of Black Americans? Who are Black Americans? Tell us about them. And they're going to tell you a list of things that might fit, typical media that we consume, that we create the demand for, where it's just trauma, or persevering against trauma, or and projecting that is one thing, but to offer it up as food for young people, in the school system, it's just I feel like it's re-traumatizing them. So I made a conscious effort to write books that speak to the humanity of young Black children, because people from characters from other races, other cultures, have, the luxury of having a wider range of types of stories that they can choose from, that other people can be exposed to kind of give them a fuller picture of themselves, and vice versa.
Right.
So, where there's catharsis in the writing for us, to kind of put, the things in our books that heal us, it's also important to put things in the books that can heal the perception, on the grander stage, heal the world in some ways, but it's just important to do that. And I do want to say something else about George Floyd, because you mentioned him and the pandemic and everything. I was going to self-publish Finding Jupiter because I knew that it was a book about Black American teenagers that was not about racism, so publishing wasn't going to care about it, readers were not going to care about it, etc. So I was just like, I'm just going to self-publish on Amazon. So I did all the research. I was going to self-publish and get rich. Amazon. And what's interesting is there was a contest that opened up on Twitter where you could pitch your book in 40 characters, and literary agents would say, hey, I'm interested in reading your book. And I can sit here and honestly say that had George Floyd's murder not been amplified the way that it was, had it not happened, it's one of those things that kind of woke all of us up across industries, across communities, to the fact that we consume violence against Black Americans so much that it was possible for people to stand around physically and watch what happened. And I can't think of another, if you flip that, I'm not going to stay on this too long, but I have to say it. If you flip it, and maybe there was a beautiful blonde woman under the knee of anybody, there would have been a mob hitting that man off her, but we were so used to it. We were so desensitized to that, to violence against Black men, that it was so easy for something like that to happen. But when it happened, it woke up industries, entertainment, across the board, and everybody was like, we need more books just about the humanity. We need more books so we can look at Black people and know they're human. They're Black people, And so my book, when I entered that contest, it's a quiet classic love story, period. I love 80s romance films. I grew up in the 80s. And so it's a quiet, soft story about Black American teenagers. Historically, publishing doesn't care about these kinds of books. However, when everything happened, there was so much attention on this book and so much desire for publishers to have it. It sold at auction. It was just a perfect storm of events that made this book possible that wouldn't exist, before that. And honestly, probably not now. Yeah. Because there's not an upheaval now. We've kind of relaxed back into, yeah. So I feel like I'm rambling, but I said all that to say that there's an importance in, amplifying stories that focus on our humanity. And I really, it's my mission to put stories in the world that do that. Because I feel like there's enough of those other stories that are amplified through the media. Not that those are the only stories that exist, but those are the ones that are amplified through the news. Bad news is the headline. And so, yeah, it's important to balance that out with, stories about love.
Thank you. I love that so much. I want to add, you briefly mentioned about the industry, right, and how the attention towards, supporting Black authors, and a lot of imprints were created during that time too that didn't exist before. LaToya Watkins' Parish was the same. It was published under an imprint that was only created after 2020. So I won't go into a long conversation. I didn't want to hear from you as well, Jasmine, on that question, but just something I've been saying, thank you all for showing up today. You showed up to support these incredible Black women writers. But now my refrain going forward is, show up for Black women and stay. Show up and stay. So, as we're continuing to do this work, be mindful in our own actions that it's not a one-off, that it's not because something else was calling you to do it. But when you do that, when you can show up for Black women and stay, then it helps all of us. It helps us have a practice of showing up and staying for each other, for everyone.
Yes, so first I wanted to say, as a young girl who read young adult romance novels over back to back to back, I lived next door to a library. I would have loved this book. I can't wait to read it now. Because I was reading a lot of white romance, green-eyed, blue-eyed, brunette, blonde. And it did shape some of my romantic expectations. And it would have been great to have this to kind of impact that a little bit. So I can't wait to read it. My relationship to the, I guess, are you saying the social justice, hard things, the
Yeah, your sense of responsibility to it. Yes.
Yes.
You know, or no.
Ooh.
Or how do you navigate that?
So I grew up in a household where we were black, and we were proud, and we were going to go to school, and we were going to change society, and I internalized a lot of that, and I also like live in this like I feel responsible to making change in our society, to making things better for Black people. I like to say people of color, especially Black people, because I do believe that once you start including Black people, everybody else will also benefit.
Rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes.
Rising tide lifts all boats.
And I think as I was doing work in spaces to make change systematically, sometimes not like I had to learn like, oh, I thought I was gonna write poetry and racism was gonna be solved because I wrote a poem, and and somebody was gonna read it and no one was gonna be racist anymore, and that was just not the case. But as I was in spaces, I am someone who does like, why are we doing this way? Why is it happening this way? Just asking questions and raising hell. And I like to think that a lot of people in those spaces benefited from the responsibility I took up to speak up. But I found that I also was being perceived as difficult. As if we include Jasmine, she's gonna want to change some things, even though the changes would be for the better. And these also might be some things that I'm just thinking in my own head as I like navigate the world and spaces. But a lot of that made me, I'm losing my train of thought. Y'all, I'm a talker. I'm so sorry. I'm trying my best. But a lot of those experiences made me feel like I needed to be more selfish with how I was trying to make social change, because I felt like I was putting others first, and then when it was time for people to advocate for me, I felt like they weren't showing up in the same ways I was showing up for them. And so I'm like now approaching like, I feel like more of an artivist than like an activist now. But I prioritize like joy, like creating spaces of joy that don't have to directly speak to all the things going on in the world or society, but just the fact that this person can be here and talk about the things that they want to talk about today, I think is really important. And so that's like the thing that's showing up for me. And in my poetry, I write a lot about social justice issues in my life, but I also write about the experience of being in a Black movie theater and people, cussing at the screen and laughing. And I also write about promiscuity. I have a poem in there called "Sluts Get the Best Grades." I was so worried for my parents to read that. But I was hot in the pants. I'm still a little hot in the pants. And I think when you're a Black woman showing up as, this and fabulous and also maybe a little attractive, people don't take your work seriously. I found myself showing up, compartmentalizing myself. I had an outfit, a character for every space I was going to be in, and now I just want to like be this person and do the work, and you can take it or leave it, and if you decide to leave it, you're missing out.
Yeah. I know that's right. Yes, you and Jordan, be able to bring your whole self into the room. And ultimately, that's what we're talking about. For me, that's what freedom is. Can you or can you not bring your whole self into the room? Is all of me welcome here? Is all of my art welcome here? Like, it doesn't mean that you have to like all of my art. There's tastes, there's preferences, it's all of those things. But it can exist in this world and find its audience. Right, and that can be every single thing that I want it to be. Them poems about rainbows, them stories about love, those stories about my history, my future, and my freedom all exist in the same body, so they'll exist in the same world. I have one last question, then we'll open up for the audience Q&A. If anyone has any questions, so be thinking, let that percolate if you have any question for these great authors. But knowing that you're all so talented in writing, across poetry, stories, and whatnot, what have you not written that you want to write? And I'll go first. I want to write a rom-com. I have a rom-com that I have notes and outline for that will be a feature film. It is going to happen. My rom-com is coming.
I have two. One I'm already kind of working on, so it's kind of cheating. I want to write a choreo poem. And I'm really, this is a test. Okay, so a choreo poem. So there's a genre of work, I think more specifically that Black women have participated in, where it's a mix of performance and theater and poetry. So if we're thinking like for colored girls,
Where Zaki Schneider.
yes. So I also got another local writer, Florinda Bryant.
Shout out Florinda Bryant. Y'all know Florinda.
I watched her do some of her choreo poem and her one woman piece, and I watched Ebony Stewart do a one woman piece.
Shout out Ebony, all Torch features, all Torch family.
Torch got some and I knew I wanted to do that as well. Someone who also makes theater. And so I've been slowly working on a project called Something in Me About the Ground. That is a choreo poem, and I've made like a little mini version of the production, but I want it to become a large production and then be printed and sold as a book and as something you can perform. So that's one. And then my other one, I do want to get into screenwriting. I also want to write a romance. And it just be about like young Black love between artists. Very artsy fartsy romance, Black, yes.
You'll love Finding Jupiter. I only write artists.
Okay.
I only write young people who create, not for public consumption, but for themselves as catharsis, because that's what helped me survive my teenage years. So I want to write, I was a homeschooler, and I have a 3-year-old now. I have a 16-year-old and a 4-year-old. Sorry, she just turned 4. I love it so much. Like, I want another one. I love my kids. I love being a mom. But I would love to write like a quirky, zany, middle grade fantasy where the protagonist is just a silly Black boy. Yeah, just a goober. Yeah, that's what I want to write.
I don't think anyone wants me to write a romance of any kind. I think, so the first thing that came to my head, living in Austin sounds kind of cliche, but I'd love to write an album of songs. But I don't sing, so I don't know who I'd be okay singing that. But I think I would love to do a graphic novel.
Yeah. Absolutely.
No idea what it, like, the nerd in me is like, elves and orcs, but this time the orcs are okay. Like, it's a whole thing. But I think that might make me happy. Yeah.
Awesome. I will be watching for all of these projects. Now, any questions from the audience? Please just raise your hand. Shirley.
I love how everyone's not making eye contact.
All right. Here we go.
I have a question. It's about Finding Jupiter, which that chapter, I'm not exactly an audience for young romance, but it's pretty interesting. I have to check that out. I'm curious, with a 16-year-old boy as a son in your life, do you ever run the kind of the male voice by him and say, does this sound about right for what you'd be thinking in a situation like this? And does he ever go, no, Mom, this isn't right? Or he nailed it? Or?
Yeah, my son, he was young. When I started writing it, I think he was like 11 or so. And he knew, my son has a sensory processing disorder, and he's a competitive swimmer. He was a competitive swimmer. And so those things I wrote so he could have a little bit of representation there. But I really didn't involve him that much in like developing the character. But mostly I was just asking him, are you going to be embarrassed? There's smooching and loving, and that it's a sex positive book. And So mainly that kind of stuff, but no, I didn't bounce too much off of him just because I wanted him to read it as a, consumer as well, but also just feeling proud that he could see a little tiny, piece of Black boyhood, in a book.
Was he embarrassed?
He wasn't embarrassed. He's very proud. He's very proud.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So you each write, I think, in very different ways and like poetry. And I just wanted to know, because you each do have a different sort of format for your writing, how do you know when you're finished? Is it that you have a certain feeling? Is it that you've created this roadmap?
Question, how do you know when you're finished with what you're writing?
I don't like it anymore. I don't like the process of thinking about whatever it is anymore. And I think that's how I know when I'm done. But my process is, I write it out by hand once, but I start off with 8 different pieces of paper and 3 notes on my phone and something on a napkin. I put it out on the table and write it out by hand that one time, and then 3 or 4 more times, and then I type it up. And then I type it full, it's a whole thing. So when I say I don't like it anymore, I'm done. I'm finished with the thing. And so when I read it again, I'm oh, that was pretty good, right? Because my brain has kind of stepped away from whatever it was, which I don't know. I wouldn't recommend that for anybody else in terms of process, because I feel like you should want to keep coming back to it. But I'm just we're good. My thing. So yeah.
For me, I kind of get I'm very spiritual. I get a feeling. And then after writing it and then editing a few times, and there's something that I go into a flow state, and then after I once it's settled, once that sense settles and I read it back and I'm yeah, that's done. I'm good with where it's ending there. So that's I just kind of feel what I feel, and then I'm it's done. But I do edit. I do edit.
Because I write fiction, I know where the story's going to end. But when I know that I'm done working on the piece, when I know I'm ready to hand it off to my agent or my editor, is when I can read it back through, and I feel like the main character is kind of very far along in her journey towards healing. I write literary fiction, and it's kind of I have all the same fiction plot points that commercial fiction has, but when I feel like the character has kind of leapfrogged where I was at 17, my healing, is coming in my 30s and 40s. I'm almost in my 50s. But when I feel like a teenager can read this, or my main character has gone through enough and experienced enough, and to where at the end of the story, she's so far along in her healing journey, then I know that the story is finished. Yeah.
Great question.
Forgive me if I don't word this properly, this time around here, but I find how you trying to balance between truth, the art, the message that you're trying to get out and you care about, reasons, and then the reality of the market, because where books fall and where they are and how easy it is to get things digitally and all that thing like that. And there are some artists who I don't care about that. I just want to get the message out. And there are some artists that are all about Instagram campaigns and things there's a balance between that with you guys. So how do you find that balance?
So I said balance between the truth and the mission of the art and the marketing or publishing industry.
Yeah.
I would argue some of that isn't really I'm thinking about banned books, right? We just had banned books week, which it's 1 week, the entire year, where we focus on the dangers of censorship. It's a hard thing for us to fight in that sense. But I think also part of what you're asking is kind of an internal censorship. I wrote a poem during the pandemic, and I held on to it because I didn't believe it would be received well. and the time that we were in. Then we had an election, and I sent the poem out. And now that we're up for another election, I'm worried about the poem being out there. So like, I'm glad I did the thing, but I kept myself in check, right? And so I feel like there are probably a number of artists out there who may be doing a similar thing. Like they haven't written the thing because they're unsure of the environment we're in, and they're unsure of the audience, or they have written the thing and it's just sitting there, right? It would be so beneficial to see it, to hear it, but it's just sitting in a space because of fear or worry or anxiety. And then if they do find a home for it, like if someone does pick it up and publish it, right? Like how quickly does our society turn on that work if it doesn't offer the version of life that's expected? I mean, I think I answered for myself. Like there's some things I'm sitting on right now because I need to know what's going to happen in November. And that's me, and I probably shouldn't approach it that way, but like it's a thing that's on my mind.
Well, during the pandemic and during all the uproar and the racial violence, I was getting my master's at UT, and we were online, and we had a lot of discussion posts because we were now completely online. And I would just respond with poems because when I was writing a book, and I would answer with poems. And one of them, and drama and theater for youth and community sounds cute, but it's like there's just a lot going on. Sociology, we're getting into it. Community, and I wrote a poem and I sent it to my professor. And the first line is, "I don't owe white people nothing." That's the line, and it's in the book. It got chosen, it got published, and then there are things where then I was getting emails like, "Is it okay if you do this? I don't want to offend you because I know you have that poem in there called that says you don't owe white people nothing." I'm like, "Yo, I don't hate white people." It's a poem, and and it's more of a nuanced experience than that. But I was learning through that process, especially with my other poem about people who get those grades, that there will be responses to the things that I write. But I'm still on the fence about trying to, like, what am I choosing to write towards a market? Because I don't understand. To be honest, I don't understand the market. I don't understand the industry. I don't understand anything that's going on. I wrote a book and submitted it to a bunch of competitions, and somebody picked it. And that's like the most. People ask me for advice all the time, and I'm like, I don't know. I was just writing poetry. So I'm just writing what's on my heart, and I hope it sticks, and I hope I can continue to write that way. But there's a price for everything. There's a price.
And I was thinking about what you said about being in a program. Like, I think people believe that writing programs offer us this information, and they do not offer that.
None.
For all
No.
the money you're paying, for all the years you're sitting there, basking in the glory of all these other people, we don't find out about the industry. Like we have to, it's the hard knocks, right? Like we have to find out personally, each of us. And then do you share it with everyone else? Because as much as people want to believe it's a community of writers, you're all still competing for the same stuff, right? Yeah. So do you tell that person, I think this thing isn't going to be received well? Or do you just like smirk and say, like, well, we'll see what happens to you, right? Like, so we're all still trying to figure it out. Right? And there's so many gatekeepers in terms of the publishing. Like, it's a wonderful thing that contest showed up, right? It's a wonderful thing that all these new places have popped up because so many people who are frustrated by this kind of static process that's been in place are now stepping forward to publish, so that we do get to see more, we do get to understand more, but we're all still kind of stumbling through it while we're trying to figure out, like, how do you find the best people to amplify your voice? Whatever it is you're saying.
Check out torchliteraryorts.org.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say to the question that you asked, it's like I am a writer who writes for the art, for the sake of the art. And I can say that because I know I speak from like kind of two positions of privilege, if I can use that word, because you know, I don't write to become famous. You know, of course I want to be a bestseller, right? And I don't, you know, I write to give representation to super sweet Black teenage love stories that have the same value as all the Molly Ringwald movies, you know, all the romances that we all root for. You know, we had, you know, these young people deserve to see themselves and their Black love being celebrated as well. Two things. I say that because you know, while I was lucky, I won a contest, my book sold, you know, big at auction. But I'm not hung up on, you know, the next book selling big. I mean, you know, the publisher paying tons of money for the next book, etc. Because I know the formula. And I say this all the time, like, don't tell anybody. I know we're being recorded, but I say this all the time to my friends because when I really decided to write this book in earnest, you know, and I did look at the space, you know, I looked at publishing, I looked at Netflix in the YA romance, you know, section on Netflix. And I want to say 100% of the time, when there was a Black teenager in a romance, they were being loved by or loving someone else who was not Black. Yeah. And the percentage is too high. We need balance. And so, you know, and I started asking myself, what does that say, you know, to young people? I grew up in Memphis. Memphis is a super Black city. I didn't interact with people of other races. I grew up in a bubble. You know, we drive down past Graceland. That's where I saw white people growing up. And so where were those sweet romances that look like mine? You know, in the 90s, we had the adult rom-com, you know, era where we could see adult romances. But where are the young, soft, sweet love stories where there are two Black teenagers just falling in love in the summertime? They're not out there unless they're running from the police or somebody got shot or something. Yeah. So I'm committed, and I can say that because the formula, if Orion, he's a competitive swimmer, super cute, wealthy. If I had made Orion white, I would be a household name. Oh, yeah. And I know that, but that's not why I write, you know? And so I can say that I'm the artist who writes for the sake of the art because this book is out here now. The next book that I write is going to be out. It's going to, you know, be on coffee tables and libraries, and I want young Black teenagers to walk past a book, see themselves, and read it, and know that their basic stories about basic life experiences and love and loss are valuable and entertaining. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'll add one thing to that, and then we're going to wrap up. But, you know, when I'm thinking about that in my own writing, too, you know, and your question about the art and the writing versus the publishing and the market, the first thing goes back to what I said earlier. Can you write it down? Because if you can't write it down, if you can't tell the story, then the other, you know, we're not even to those questions yet. Can you tell your story? Can you honestly tell the story that is in you? The story that only you can tell? We need to be there first. And then, incredible writer, poet, author Michael Weaver, he writes, you know, just incredible, very personally inspired poetry. And I was, you know, coming up 20 years ago asking him, how are you able to write so vulnerably about your mama and the women in your life and the good and the bad and the ugly of all of that? And he said, the first thing to do is to write it down. And then you worry about what you'll do with it later. But if your worry first is about the market, you won't get to the market. You have to have your unique story first. Don't you hit me with that shit. All right, y'all. Thank you so much to our incredible authors, Kelis Rowe, Jasmine, and Prudence Arceneaux. I'm Amanda Johnston. Thank you for coming. Do check us out on torchliteraryarts.org, but don't go. We've got some bites over here. Please grab something to eat. We've got some sparkling water in the cooler, and definitely shop, support BookPeople, and when you buy today, you're also supporting Torch. Thank you. Oh, and at 5 o'clock, we've got Torch Karaoke right here. So if you're still around, come back. What's Torch Karaoke, you say? It is when you read something by a Torch feature, we have printouts, don't worry, or you can read your own original piece and it'll just be a fun open mic. But we'll be right back here at 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Also, I'm just gonna add real quick, I'll be around. BookPeople has my books downstairs. If you want,
Yes, yes.
I'll sign it. I have super cute bookmarks, and even if you don't buy it, I have bookmarks, so come see me.
Yes, and the books are actually downstairs. Somebody's Daughter and Finding Jupiter are downstairs at the info desk. So get your book down there, but then come back up and see these authors and get it signed.
How do you get her book?
It's not available right now. Prudence is not available. There's,
Follow you and then eventually.
follow Prudence Arceneaux online, follow Torch Literary Arts, because we'll tell you as soon as we get some more. Thank you.
Thank you.